Hey everybody, here I have a ViewSonic model VA1930W monitor, and this monitor was brought into me because it was having some issues. The owner was having issues with it. He tried to start it up, and majority of the time he couldn't successfully start it. It would turn on and cut right back off. And he said once he would finally get it to run, it would run and work just fine. So I'm suspecting that this monitor probably has some bad capacitors in the power supply. So I looked online to see if I can find some videos on how to disassemble this monitor. This is actually my first monitor that I've ever worked on. I have one that was given to me, but it's buried behind a bunch of stuff right now because we're installing a hardwood floor, so I can't get to my monitor, which is behind all sorts of furniture and stuff, so that project has to wait. Anyways, I have this one here I'm working on. And like I said, I couldn't find any videos online on how to disassemble it. So, I'm going to explain how this works. Okay, this panel, of course, goes on the back of the monitor, like so. You have two screws, one here and one here. And of course, you have to remove your stand or wall stand first before you can do anything with it. Once you have your stand or your wall thingy off of here, like I say, you remove these two screws, and this monitor here comes apart a little bit different than most. There are two notches. So I can find them. There's somewhere inside of either this or this, but you'll see them when you're trying to pop this thing loose. You have a notch in this area and a notch in this area, and it's the same way on the other side. You pop those loose, then you can start taking your flathead screwdriver and just prying this thing apart. But the thing is, the LCD and electronics won't pull loose from the front panel. You'll first have, once you get the parts separated, there are 4 notches on the back shell that hold on to the LCD panel, and of course they go in right here and right here, and of course it's the same way on both sides. You have to pop those out, and then this right here will come off like so. It just pops off. So the next step will be to remove this shield. So we have a screw here that we have to remove, and we have 2 screws here. Let us see if there's any screws in the bottom. I don't see any so far. Let's have a look up here top. I think we just have 2 screws here, this one screw here, and we have 2 more on this side. Okay, I've taken the screws loose. Now we need to unplug these plugs here from the, well, I believe it's a driver on this monitor. It's in the same area as the power supply. A little clip there, it pops up. It's a little tricky with one hand, but anyways, I'll go and get that done. Okay, finally managed to get these connectors off. Took a little bit of prime power to get them off. I managed to get them out. So now this piece here lifts up, and then there is a ribbon cable. Excuse me, I'm trying to turn this thing around. There's a ribbon cable right there. You have to remove this tape and disconnect that cable. Okay, we have 4 screws that have to be removed, so we can get the power supply and have a look at it. There's one here, one over here, you might be able to see, and one over here. Okay, Got the power supply board out, and voila, we have a failed capacitor bulging on top. And these are called Suscon or something, however you pronounce it. Suscon capacitor, some weird brand I never heard of before. This power supply is full of them. And these are 25 volt caps, so I have to go get me some to repair this thing. That's probably what's causing this thing to act up. Okay. Had to go out and buy some capacitors, and the only place I could think of really close was Radio Shack. I could have ordered some capacitors offline, but I need to get this done and out here really quick, so that's why I went to Radio Shack and got the capacitors I needed. Now, I don't really recommend Radio Shack capacitors unless you really have to get them, which in this case I pretty much had to. That's the only local place around that sells capacitors, other than going on the internet, like I say. So I managed to find some capacitors that are all rated at 35 volts but have the same capacitance ratings, and they're actually the same size as the old capacitors. Now, these capacitors are branded Leland, and way back in the early 2000s this was one of the crap brands. I pulled some bad caps of this brand off of the MSI 815E Pro motherboard years back, but it appears that they have gotten their act together, because my parent system, the Black Max, has quite a few Leland capacitors on its Foxconn motherboard, its WinFast motherboard, and I've never had any issues with the capacitors on that board, so I think they finally got their act together. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and get these installed. And for the others, which are 16 volt and a 10 volt cap, I already have some on hand. I'll just use my existing capacitors to repair those. But the whole idea is to get all of the vulnerable Suscon capacitors except for the high voltage capacitor and the really itty bitty ones. The really itty bitty ones and the high voltage capacitors usually don't have this issue with faulty electrolyte, since they usually use a different style of formula. But these size capacitors are ones that are usually prone to failure. Anyways, I'm going to get these installed. Okay, here's the power supply board with its replaced capacitors. And let's have a look here. You might be able to notice this power supply actually displays its different sections. On the PCB, there's markings that separate the different components in the power supply. This is your AC intake and filtering stage. And of course there's a transformer. When it goes out this way, this side of the power supply is what drives the step-up components for your CCFL backlights in the monitor, in the LCD. And on this side, this is the side that drives the audio, which is on the built-in speakers, and the logic board, which we'll have to look at here in just a second. So this power supply board is ready to get reinstalled, but like I said, I'm going to check the logic board, make sure all its capacitors are okay before I put the monitor back together. Okay, I just pulled the logic board loose, and here it is. I think we're all good to go. Zoom in a little bit. Logic board looks just fine. Now it's just a matter of putting everything back together and trying it out. Okay, I got the monitor plugged up to my spare computer and it is working like new. Not a problem at all. I'm just going to let it run for a little while. This computer ain't the fanciest in the world. This hard drive is slow as crap. Anyways, we know the monitor's working. So there we go. The new capacitors in the monitor fix the problem. Puts out a really good picture too. The reason why the stand is missing is because the owner actually has this monitor mounted on the wall. He has 6 monitors on his computer. I think he says he does some sort of document editing of some sort. He has 6 displays for his machine. This is working really well. So not bad for my first monitor fix. Anyways, had any questions or comments, feel free to ask.